Nobody saw it coming, but when Ford made their move, the entire nation felt it. The automotive industry has long been a battleground for politics, trade wars, and economic power plays. But Ford's latest decision wasn't just another business move, it was a direct challenge to Donald Trump's economic policies. In an announcement that sent shockwaves through the nation, Ford declared that it would be shifting a significant portion of its electric vehicle production overseas. For decades, Ford has been one of the most recognizable symbols of American manufacturing. Built on the backbone of Detroit's industrial might, the company has weathered economic storms, government bailouts, and shifts in consumer demand. Yet this latest move wasn't just about business, it was a statement. While Ford positioned the shift as part of its commitment to sustainability and global growth, others saw it as something far more controversial, a direct rejection of Trump's America First policies. The response was immediate and explosive. At first glance, Ford's announcement seemed like a standard corporate restructuring update. But as the details emerged, it became clear that this was much more than that. Ford wasn't just moving some operations overseas, it was making a bold pivot to prioritize international markets over U.S. manufacturing. And while Ford's CEO, Jim Farley, assured the public that American jobs would not be lost, the reality was impossible to ignore. Shifting EV production abroad meant fewer new jobs at home. So why did Ford take such a risk? The answer lies in the mounting pressure from tariffs, rising production costs, and supply chain instability. Trump's tariffs on imported materials, particularly steel and aluminum, had already driven up production costs. The EV market is booming globally, and Ford saw more opportunity in expanding its footprint outside of the U.S. sourcing materials like lithium, cobalt, and nickel, crucial for EV batteries, was far more efficient in Europe and Asia. Rather than struggle under the weight of tariffs and trade restrictions, Ford's leadership chose to play the long game, a move that was sure to anger the former president. It didn't take long for Trump to respond. Just hours after the news broke, he took to his social media platform, rally stages, and television interviews to launch a full-scale attack on Ford. Speaking before a roaring crowd at a rally, he declared, "We built Ford. The American worker built Ford. And now they're turning their backs on us? It's a disgrace, folks." His words weren't just rhetoric. They were a declaration of war against the company. Trump called for a boycott of Ford vehicles and demanded immediate action to penalize companies that outsource jobs overseas. The former president's Make America Great Again base quickly mobilized, flooding social media with calls to abandon the brand. The backlash was swift, but Ford was prepared. The Ford versus Trump battle wasn't just about one automaker's decision, it quickly became a litmus test for the future of American industry, economic nationalism, and corporate loyalty. Conservative media outlets aligned with Trump, painting Ford as an example of corporate greed and betrayal of American workers. Headlines screamed, "Ford abandons America," and commentators warned that this was just the beginning of major companies ignoring Trump's economic policies. Progressive outlets, however, framed Ford's decision as a necessary evolution, a strategic move to remain competitive in a world rapidly shifting toward green energy and global supply chains. The focus was on Ford's commitment to sustainability and innovation rather than its decision to expand overseas. Meanwhile, social media exploded into debate. Hashtags like Don Boycott Ford and Ford Fights Back trended side by side, reflecting the growing divide. Some consumers swore off Ford forever, while others applauded the company for standing its ground. One thing was clear, this wasn't going to blow over anytime soon. The root of the conflict. Ford's decision to shift electric vehicle production overseas was more than just a corporate maneuver. It was a direct response to economic policies that had been brewing for years. Behind the scenes, tensions had been rising between major automakers and the Trump administration, particularly over tariffs and the global supply chain. Now the conflict had spilled into the public eye and both sides were ready for battle. For years, Trump had built his platform on the idea of bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States. He imposed heavy tariffs on steel, aluminum, and auto parts, believing that higher costs on imports would force companies to reinvest in American workers. In theory, this was a bold economic strategy. In reality, it put massive financial strain on automakers like Ford, who relied on a complex international network to source the materials necessary for vehicle production. The cost of key components skyrocketed, making domestic manufacturing less competitive than ever before. The shift to electric vehicles only added another layer of complexity. Unlike traditional gas-powered cars, EVs depend on minerals like lithium, cobalt, and nickel, resources that are not abundant in the United States. China, on the other hand, controlled a vast majority of these materials, leaving American automakers scrambling for alternatives. When Trump's trade policies made imports from key suppliers more expensive, Ford executives faced a dilemma: raise prices on their vehicles or move operations to countries where costs were lower. They chose the latter. The announcement came at the worst possible time for Trump. He was already gearing up for another political campaign, and Ford's decision became an easy target for his rallies. Standing in front of thousands of supporters, he railed against the automaker, accusing them of betraying the American worker. "We gave them everything. We protected them. And now they're leaving us behind? It's disgusting." The crowd erupted in agreement, and the message was clear. Ford had become the new villain in Trump's economic war. Ford, however, wasn't backing down. In carefully worded statements, the company emphasized its continued commitment to American jobs, pointing out that they were still investing billions in domestic EV plants. But no matter how they framed it, the perception was already set. To Trump's supporters, Ford's move was a slap in the face, a sign that corporate America was more interested in profits than patriotism. As the political battle intensified, the economic consequences began to unfold. Consumers took sides, with some Trump loyalists calling for a boycott of Ford vehicles. Online, hashtags like Boycott Ford and Made in America trended side by side as debates raged over whether Ford was making a strategic business decision or betraying its heritage. Dealers in Trump-leaning states reported a noticeable dip in Ford sales, while progressive cities saw an increase in interest in Ford's new electric models. The divide was becoming more than just political. It was shaping the future of American commerce. Other automakers watched the unfolding drama with caution. Companies like General Motors and Toyota had been following a similar strategy, expanding their EV operations overseas to stay competitive in a rapidly changing market. But Ford had become the lightning rod, and what happened next could set a precedent for how businesses navigated political pressure. Would the backlash force them to reconsider their global strategy, or would they hold their ground and risk further alienation? Meanwhile, the financial markets were reacting. Ford's stock took a hit in the immediate aftermath of Trump's attack as investors worried about potential retaliatory measures from Washington. Speculation grew over whether Trump or other Republican leaders would push for new tariffs or tax penalties targeting automakers shifting jobs abroad. Lobbyists scrambled to gauge the potential fallout, while corporate executives weighed their next steps carefully. In the halls of Washington, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle saw an opportunity. Trump's allies pushed for tougher restrictions on companies that outsourced production, proposing tax incentives for automakers that pledged to keep jobs in America. Progressive politicians, on the other hand, used the moment to argue that sustainability and economic growth were not mutually exclusive, pushing for expanded government support for the EV industry. The clash over Ford wasn't just a business dispute anymore, it had become a battleground for the future of economic policy. As tensions escalated, both Ford and Trump knew that this was only the beginning. The automaker had made its decision and Trump had made his stance clear. But the broader question remained: was this a one-time controversy, or was it a sign of a deeper shift in American industry? Would the country cling to traditional manufacturing ideals, or would it embrace a new global economic reality? One thing was certain: neither side was willing to back down. The next moves from Ford and Trump would not only shape their own legacies, but redefine the future of American manufacturing itself. And the entire world was watching. A clash between powerhouses. The battle between Ford and Trump had become more than just a political talking point, it was now a full-scale economic war. As the former president ramped up his attacks, Ford doubled down on its stance, setting the stage for an unprecedented clash between corporate power and political influence. Trump's relentless criticism of Ford only grew louder. In a televised town hall, he made it clear that he wasn't letting this issue go. "We made Ford great. They've been part of America's story for over a century. And now? Now they're walking away from the American worker." His base erupted in agreement, and the pressure on Ford intensified. The company found itself at the center of one of the most divisive debates in modern economic history. Was corporate America abandoning the very country that had made it successful? Despite the growing outcry, Ford had no intention of reversing course. Instead, they leaned into their vision of the future, announcing an aggressive expansion of their electric vehicle operations overseas, citing global demand and supply chain efficiency as the driving factors. CEO James Farley appeared on major news networks, emphasizing Ford's commitment to sustainability. "This isn't about abandoning America. It's about leading the world in the EV revolution," he insisted. Meanwhile, the political fallout was intensifying. Trump's allies in Congress proposed new tariffs specifically targeting automakers that moved production abroad. Lobbyists scrambled to influence legislation that could determine the future of the industry. The auto sector was watching closely. Would Ford's defiance inspire other manufacturers to follow suit, or would they buckle under political pressure? As the stakes grew higher, Ford's leadership faced a dilemma that extended beyond profitability. How would this fight shape their brand in the eyes of the American people? The company had spent over a century marketing itself as an American icon, yet now it risked alienating millions of potential customers. The situation was further complicated by a growing divide among American consumers. Some hailed Ford's move as a bold step into the future, while others saw it as an outright betrayal. Dealerships in pro-Trump states reported drops in sales, as loyalists to the former president turned their backs on the brand. On the flip side, progressive consumers and environmental advocates threw their support behind Ford, seeing their focus on EVs as a much-needed step toward sustainability. The tension soon spilled over into corporate boardrooms across the country. Other major automakers, including General Motors and Tesla, were forced to weigh in. GM remained neutral, emphasizing its domestic production while avoiding direct confrontation with Trump. Tesla's CEO Elon Musk, however, took the opportunity to promote his company's commitment to U.S.-based manufacturing, tweeting, "We build here." The automotive industry was fracturing, caught between politics and progress. Financial markets reacted accordingly. Ford's stock saw fluctuations as investors grappled with the long-term consequences of the feud. Some saw opportunity, an automaker willing to embrace a globalized future, securing its place at the forefront of EV innovation. Others feared retaliation from Trump-aligned lawmakers, wary of the potential regulatory and economic fallout. As the dust settled on this stage of the fight, one thing was clear: Ford had made its decision, and Trump had drawn his battle lines. But neither side showed signs of backing down. Would Ford's vision of a globally integrated EV-focused future triumph? Or would Trump's push for economic nationalism force a dramatic reversal? The battle was far from over, and the next phase promised even greater stakes. America's manufacturing future, corporate independence, and political power were all colliding, setting the stage for an unpredictable showdown. The final showdown. Who comes out on top? The battle between Ford and Donald Trump had reached its boiling point. What had started as a corporate decision had spiraled into a national debate about patriotism, economics, and the future of American industry. Both sides were digging in, refusing to back down. Ford was pushing forward with its global EV expansion, while Trump was mobilizing his base, calling for harsher penalties on companies that outsource jobs. As the feud escalated, Trump doubled down on his attacks. In a fiery speech at a rally in Michigan, the heart of America's auto industry, he vowed to punish Ford for what he called corporate betrayal. "We gave them everything. We protected them. And what do? They stab us in the back and take their jobs elsewhere." The crowd erupted in anger. Trump then promised a new set of tariffs and tax penalties, targeting automakers that move production overseas. If he had any influence left in Washington, he intended to use it. Ford, however, was prepared for this fight. Rather than retreat, they went on the offensive. In a carefully crafted public relations campaign, the company emphasized its commitment to both innovation and American jobs. They unveiled new investments in U.S.-based EV infrastructure, including battery production facilities and assembly plants. CEO James Farley made a public statement standing firm, "Ford has been and always will be an American company, but we also have to be a global company. Our goal is to lead in innovation, not get stuck in the past." Despite Ford's efforts to balance its global ambitions with its domestic roots, the backlash was real. Dealerships in conservative strongholds reported a decline in sales, while Trump supporters called for boycotts. On the other hand, the progressive consumer base, excited about EVs and sustainability, rallied behind Ford, praising them for refusing to cave to political pressure. The rest of the auto industry was watching closely. General Motors, Toyota, and even Tesla executives remained cautious, avoiding direct involvement in the Ford-Trump clash. However, Elon Musk, never one to shy away from controversy, tweeted, "This is why we keep production here. Just saying." The message was clear. Tesla was staying out of politics but ready to capitalize on the situation. Meanwhile, the economic and political ripple effects were becoming impossible to ignore. Ford's stock fluctuated wildly, reflecting investor uncertainty. Lawmakers debated new legislation aimed at preventing further outsourcing, while corporate lobbyists fought to ensure that businesses retained the flexibility to operate globally. Then came the tipping point. Trump announced that if he returned to office, he would fully reinstate his strict economic nationalism policies, prioritizing U.S. manufacturing at any cost. His supporters cheered, but Ford and other major corporations braced for impact. Would this be the final push needed to force Ford's hand? Or would they stay the course, betting that the future of the auto industry was bigger than any political movement? In the end, Ford remained firm. Their vision for a global EV revolution was set in motion, and they refused to reverse it. Trump, meanwhile, had successfully weaponized the controversy, using it as fuel for his next political campaign. The battle lines were drawn, but neither side could claim total victory. What remained was a fractured automotive industry, a deeply divided consumer base, and an unresolved question. Was Ford's decision the first step in an inevitable shift toward global manufacturing, or the beginning of a major reckoning for corporate America? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. This was not just about Ford and Trump anymore, it was about the future of American industry itself.